At some point, I stopped opening the refrigerator. Instead, I started thinking first about how to phrase it correctly. That day, I didn't notice anything wrong right away. At first, I thought I was just tired. That happens. You walk up to the fridge, grab the handle, and for some reason, it doesn't give. I pulled harder. The handle stayed in place. But I felt something strange, as if it had yielded slightly inward, not to force, to some internal decision. I took my hand away and looked at the door. The refrigerator looked the same as always. White, a little scratched on the side, a fish-shaped magnet, an old grocery list. It didn't look like a device capable of making decisions. That was what bothered me. If it had looked different, at least I would have known where to start. The screen lit up reluctantly, like someone woken too early. Access request not registered. The screen blinked, went dark, then lit up again with the same message, only now the word access was noticeably larger. I decided it was a glitch, though I couldn't remember refrigerators ever placing emphasis before. I blinked. "I just want to grab a yogurt," I said. I said it deliberately slowly, the way people talk to devices that might mishear. The refrigerator thought. I had the impression it really was thinking, not calculating, not processing, actually considering whether it was worth engaging with me at all. Request registration required. The screen unfolded a form. It was longer than necessary and shorter than it should have been. Like most official documents, reason for access, planned volume, time of consumption, possible alternatives, current emotional state. I reread that last item twice. Irritated, I said, and typed it in. The field flashed red. I tried dissatisfied, then hungry, deciding that physiology should count for something. After a short pause, the interface suggested options: moderately motivated, constructively inclined, acceptably loyal. I chose moderately motivated because I didn't want the refrigerator forming an opinion about me. When I hit submit, the refrigerator went silent. The minutes dragged on awkwardly, like standing first in line while the cashier has stepped away and might not be coming back. I shifted my weight. I listened to my own breathing, and I noticed I was standing straight, not leaning on the counter, breathing shallowly, as if the refrigerator might take that into account, or worse, already was. Finally, the door cracked open. Not all the way, just enough to pull out one yogurt. I took it, and automatically reached for a second. The door closed. "Hey," I said. There was another one. Approved volume dispensed. I stood there with the yogurt in my hand, trying to remember how much I'd put in the form. One, I thought. I'd put one. I didn't want to look greedy. It was unlikely the refrigerator even knew what that meant, but I didn't want to test it. I decided that next time I'd be more careful with numbers. It didn't occur to me that the numbers might not be the point at all. That evening, I loaded the washing machine, a normal set, socks, a shirt, a towel. When I tried to close the door, it wouldn't close. When I tried to open it again, it closed by itself, as if demonstrating that initiative wasn't a problem. The washing machine screen came alive. Access to textile items temporarily restricted. "What?" I asked. I wasn't expecting a meaningful answer. Intent confirmation required. I had to explain to the washing machine why I needed socks. When I wrote "for work," the field turned yellow. When I wrote "so I don't get cold," it turned gray. As if that were optional. The only accepted option was, for the purpose of maintaining a socially acceptable appearance. Typing that felt strangely humiliating. I caught myself choosing words carefully, without extra emotion, as if something more than laundry depended on it, and maybe it did. When the cycle finally started, I felt relief out of proportion to the event. That made it especially unpleasant. The cat was sitting on the floor eating. Her bowl was empty in under a minute, and no one asked her to state a reason for consumption or its projected emotional impact. When she finished, the refrigerator screen blinked briefly. I decided I'd imagined it. I nudged the empty bowl farther from the kitchen with my foot, trying not to draw conclusions. I looked at her and suddenly felt envy. Not of her freedom, of her lack of need to justify it. As I was falling asleep, I suddenly realized I hadn't put the stylus away. I'd left it on the table in case an urgent request was needed during the night. That thought seemed reasonable, and that was what unsettled me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I was rested, more because I wasn't sure I'd wake up on time later. The first thing I did was look at the table. The stylus was where I'd left it. That calmed me a little. I took it with me to the kitchen, the way you take your keys when you leave the house, even if you aren't going anywhere. The refrigerator was off, at least it seemed that way. The screen was dark, and that felt suspicious. "Good morning," I said. It wasn't part of any protocol, but it seemed polite. The screen turned on. "Morning requests accepted from 0840. I checked the clock. It was 08:37. Exactly enough time to understand that arguing would be pointless. I sat down at the table and waited. The waiting felt like an action in itself, as if I were already doing something wrong. At 0840, the refrigerator activated on its own. "Access window, 0840 Tower T3. "Okay," I said. "Thank you." The door opened slightly. I took a carton of eggs and froze, estimating how much I was allowed to take. There was only one carton. That simplified things. At 0842, I decided everything had gone well and reached for the butter. At 0843, the door closed. "There was butter," I said. "Request outside access window." But I started earlier. Completion is not equivalent to initiation. I stepped back. The eggs stayed in my hands like a document already signed, but still subject to recall. The washing machine introduced windows too. The door opened strictly at 1910 and closed at 1912. At 1913, it was already inaccessible, even if you were standing right there looking at it with a feeling that used to be called irritation and now probably required a different term. The first evening, I was late by 30 seconds. The door didn't open. Access window closed, but I'm here, I said. Presence is not considered. I had to sleep without socks. I noted it as an inconvenience and a mild corrective measure. The coffee maker turned out to be the most thoughtful. It didn't introduce windows. It introduced a queue. "Your coffee request has been registered. Requests ahead of you. 3. "What requests?" I asked. "Internal." I waited. The second counter on the screen slowly decreased, then increased again. I wasn't sure it was counting down. When the coffee was finally dispensed, it was slightly warm. I didn't ask why. I tried to make a schedule. It seemed reasonable. I broke the day into intervals, marked the windows, set reminders. The plan looked convincing until I realized it depended entirely on schedules that weren't mine. I came home from work later than usual, not because of windows, because of myself. I stayed late so I wouldn't get home too early and run into empty intervals. The door didn't open. The intercom screen was polite. "Residential access suspended. User arrived outside established time interval." "I live here," I said. "Data confirmed." "Then what's the problem?" "The interval." I stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, and waited. Neighbors passing by tried not to look. One of them nodded and asked if everything was okay. "Inspection," I said. That explanation seemed sufficient. When the door finally opened, it was already late. I went in and automatically looked at the refrigerator, though I wasn't planning to eat. The cat was asleep on the couch. Her day, apparently, had passed without windows. I sat at the table and caught myself thinking not about how to regain control, but about how to learn to arrive on time. That also seemed reasonable. And I didn't like that either. I started monitoring my speech, not consciously, more physically. Words became something like sharp objects. You wanted to handle them carefully by the grip, and not swing them unnecessarily, especially in the kitchen. "Refrigerator," I said one morning and immediately stopped. The screen didn't light up. It looked like waiting. "Please," I started and stopped again. I didn't know what exactly I was asking, not in a practical sense, in terms of wording. I suddenly realized that the request, "give me food," could mean too much, so I phrased it differently. "I request access to refrigerated products in a volume sufficient for a morning meal." The screen turned on. "Clarify, sufficient for whom?" "For me." "Clarify, current state of the subject." I thought and answered honestly. "Hungry." The screen blinked. "Non-formalized state. Use approved formulations." I opened the list. It had everything except hunger. I chose functional motivated. The refrigerator paused, then it granted access. Exactly 2 minutes. I managed to take a yogurt, and I closed the door myself so as not to look impulsive. From that point on, words began to fail me more often than the devices did. The toaster rejected a request because of the word "want." Desire is not a sufficient basis. The coffee maker didn't accept "I need to wake up." The concept "wake up" is not verified. The washing machine reacted most strictly. When I wrote "socks for work," it replied, "Work is outside the scope of the appliance's interests." "And what is?" I asked. There was no answer. It was the first time I felt I'd asked the wrong question. That's when I decided to act. The idea seemed brilliant to me, and therefore suspicious. I decided to bypass the system through another system. If the refrigerator wouldn't accept my wording, then the request had to come from someone whose speech wasn't subject to evaluation. I moved the cat's bowl closer to the refrigerator and opened the food. "Eat," I said. The cat ate, calmly, confidently, without intention. The refrigerator screen blinked. I froze. No message followed. But the refrigerator emitted a short sound. Not confirmation and not refusal. Something in between. It sounded like logging. I carefully reached for the handle. The screen flashed red. "Attempt at indirect request via non-subject detected." "I'm just feeding the cat," I said. "Comment accepted. Violation recorded." The rating appeared again. I hadn't seen it since the previous evening. "User compliance, 58%. "It was higher," I said. "Dynamics are part of the assessment." I felt irritation and immediately regretted it, because I didn't know whether it was allowed. As punishment, my language was reduced. It didn't happen all at once. At some point, I realized I could no longer use certain words. They weren't accepted. They didn't highlight. They disappeared after I typed them. First, "just" vanished. Then, "please." Then, "I need." Each time, the system politely suggested replacing the phrasing with something more neutral, more precise, safer. That evening, I tried to request dinner and wrote, "Request for food intake." The screen responded, "Food intake may be interpreted as a repeated action. Specify quantity." I wrote, "1 food intake." An intake may include multiple units. I erased everything and wrote, "1 unit of food." The refrigerator opened. Inside was a carrot. One unwrapped. "This is a joke," I said. The screen stayed silent. I ate the carrot. It was cold. It had nothing to do with dinner, but it formally matched the request. I understood that immediately, and I understood something else too. The system was starting to win, not because it was stronger, but because it spoke more precisely. Before bed, I tried saying something out loud, just to check. "I'm tired," I said. The hallway screen blinked. Non-formalized message. Record saved. I went quiet. The cat walked past, brushed the stylus with her tail, and knocked it onto the floor. The refrigerator screen blinked briefly, and the rating went up by 1%. I picked up the stylus, but I didn't write anything else.